Welcome into another edition of Tampa 2. Casey Phillips here with staff writer Bree Dix, and we got a win to talk about.
That we do, Casey.
We got a win to talk about. That always makes the show way more fun for us. And we have a big one coming up to talk about as well. So plenty to get into here. Let's start with big picture takeaways from this last game, the win, and maybe start on the offensive side of things.
Well, what an absolute bounce back by this team. 20-6 victory over the Tennessee Titans. And offensively, I think, they started out a little slow, but you kind of just saw them get into a rhythm, kind of started out with the outbreaking routes to Chris Godwin, to Mike Evans, kind of targeting the bigger bodied guys on the outside. And then while the Bucs still continue to work on the run game with, the mid-zone principles, the duo, they've kind of been able to get Rachaad White going in the screen game with kind of the bubbles, the empty packages to kind of supplement that run game to open up play action. And he had the screen that he took 43 yards to the house for the touchdown, kind of made the initial guy miss, quickly accelerated, got north and south. So I think that's encouraging to see just kind of the ways that the Bucs have been able to adjust. And when necessarily the run game isn't exactly what you want it to be, you're still finding ways to get in the end zone. And then defensively, it was like, I felt like the entire time I was just laughing up in the press box because it reminded me of the Michael Jordan meme from The Last Dance, and I took that personally. And it was like after their game against the Texans, what they were hearing about the secondary, the issues, the yards they gave up to C.J. Stroud, they took it personally.
Yeah.
And they came out and played lights out against Will Levis. They had 4 sacks, 13 quarterback hits, and 10 tackles for loss. I mean, just consistently won the battle in the trenches, attacked on first down, kind of kept the Titans in the second, third and long situations, dictated the pace of the game. And then, whether it was Antoine Winfield Jr.'s interception off Marquise Watts getting the hit on Levis, or Kalijah Kancey just absolutely invading the backfield, the tackles for loss, kind of clogging holes and not bottling up Derrick Henry along with Vita Vea. I think he finished with 20 yards from scrimmage. Just absolutely incredible job by them not letting him get that head of steam and getting to the second and third level. And then Jamel Dean just absolutely blanketing DeAndre Hopkins' route, getting the inside leverage and putting his body in the way, preventing that touchdown catch. So just overall, really, really impressive performance by the defense. And I loved, just to kind of give some illumination to what Kalijah Kancey's doing. And to me, it's even more impressive considering the games that he missed with the calf injury. But also, this is an undersized defensive tackle by the NFL standards. All throughout the pre-draft process, him coming out of Pittsburgh, it was, is he going to be able to hold up in the run game? All of those things that you were hearing. So, cave doubters.
Yep.
Kancey became the first rookie with multiple tackles for loss in consecutive games since Micah Parsons and Jalen Phillips accomplished the feat in 2021. He posted his 5th and 6th tackles for loss of the season, surpassing Philadelphia's Jalen Carter for the second most tackles for loss among rookies this season. Mic drop.
Yep.
I just absolutely love it.
That's
love
great.
It.
I had the exact same stats in my sheet because we're both on team Kalijah Kancey right now, wanting to show everybody exactly what he's doing. And look, when you're in the same conversation as Micah Parsons in terms of what you're doing as a rookie,
that's impressive.
It's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal. Yeah, I think for me, just the offensive side of things, I loved seeing Mike Evans have himself a day, and he had himself a day despite a couple drops that I know he would love to have back and are not characteristic and all that stuff. When you can have a couple drops and still have 143 yards and a touchdown, it's not too shabby.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was so great to see him get going early, that we've talked about this with the offensive. Sometimes they've struggled with some slow starts or struggled to get Mike involved until later. And I just think when you can get Mike involved early, it sets him up for so much, but also it forces the defense to be so honest, which then opens up, more for the run game, for Rachaad, for the screen game. And look, it can work the other way too. If you get Rachaad going early, then that can help Mike. But I do think that when you can get the ball to Mike and Chris like they did early on, it really sets the offense up for success, gets them rolling a little bit. And I was kind of doing the same thing with Mike that you did with Kalijah. I love throwing Mike Evans stats out there. There's a million of them, but so he now has the 38th most receiving yards in NFL history.
Wow.
And the 16th most receiving touchdowns in NFL history. It's just wild. Every week he's moving up these stats too.
Yeah.
So it's like every week we could just have this segment of like for him and then also Levante David. Of both of them are just at the point now where every game it feels like there is some overall
Record they're
NFL
shattering.
history that they're just moving up a spot. Yeah, and Rashad's touchdown, that was our longest scoring play of the season at that point. It's just like, man, that had to feel so good, especially knowing this offense has not been stellar in the red zone compared to what I know they think they can be and what they want to do. So, hey, look, you don't even have to get in the red zone to score. That could be handy.
Yeah.
So great to see that as well for him. And I loved watching our offensive line on that play. That one, Robert Hainsey threw a crucial block at the beginning of that run. And then I also was really impressed. Cody Mauk.
Yes.
He
was
turned on
running
the
down.
Jets.
Yes, he did.
And I think I heard that he hit, if you looked at the next gen stuff, 17 miles an hour, which again, for a guard, like trucking down there.
It was bulldozing.
I was like, I loved that. And just seeing their work, especially in the screen game as an offensive line, is really great to see them out in space, hitting those key blocks, and just the way that, while I know they would all love and the team would love if like a more quote unquote traditional run game was getting more, was being more productive, they're making it work. And I think that when you have a lot of new pieces on an offense, everything from the coordinator to the quarterback to a shuffled offensive line, all that stuff, it takes time. And I think you're seeing two elements of it. I think you're seeing one, just the scheme and understanding and the chemistry and all of that is coming together more. Yeah. But also the adjustments being made of where I love when coaches aren't just like, well, this is what I want to do, so do it.
We're going to do it.
That it's, what do we have? What is working? What plays to our guys' strengths? And then making those adjustments. And I think we've seen Coach Canales and everybody else with the offense do a really good job of that. Of, you know what? Rashad is really good in space. Let's put him in space.
So we're going to continue to feature him that way.
Instead of just trying to like bang your head against a wall of something that maybe isn't working quite as well, they said, you know what? This is working.
Yeah.
And it can have the same effect on a defense in terms of still, sucking them down a little bit, making Mike and Chris more open. So let's just go with that. We're not going to be stubborn about what we think it should look like or should be. And I think that's great. On the defensive side of things, man, I just think about the idea of if before the game I had said to you, we're going to hold Derrick Henry to 24 yards rushing and DeAndre Hopkins to 27 yards receiving.
Probably wouldn't have.
You would be like, nobody can do that. That's not a thing. That's not possible. That to me is the most incredible feat I have ever heard. For both, to stop both ends of that, of like, I think you almost view it as like you'd have to pick your poison, right? If you can try to stop Derrick Henry or DeAndre Hopkins. And the fact that they were able to hold both of them, I cannot imagine, to your point, more of a bounce back, feel good thing for the defense than we just held two of the absolute best at their positions to almost nothing.
Well, and going into the gauntlet of talent this week that the 49ers have, what a confidence builder for that unit.
I completely agree. Yeah, so they allowed the 55-yard drive that ended in a field goal on that very first drive, but then just gave up 29 net yards and 1 first down the other first half drives. So the whole rest of the first half on all their other drives after that first one, only giving up 29 net yards and 1 first down. That is a dominant performance, and how demoralizing for a team to go into half knowing like how little you're getting. I thought that was really great. And they got sacks on their first 3 drives. They had 5 tackles for loss in the first quarter, which matches the most by any team in a single quarter this season. And then, Kalijah Cansey with his tackles for loss. And then I also really wanted to shout out Yaya Diaby and Marquise Watts. We have talked about the fact that this team has wanted and needed a little bit more in terms of pass rush from the outside linebackers. And to see these young guys getting a chance, getting their impact, they both have amazing stories, sort of unconventional routes to how they got here. To see that, I love especially a guy like Marquise Watts being on essentially just your scout team in practice, that he's giving your first team the looks at the other team. And he was just working so hard and doing so well that coaches are like, man, we gotta give him a shot, and that he was going against the likes of Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke in practice and putting them to work. And we had Tristan Wirfs on our Bucs Total Access radio show Monday, and he talked about how he's like, Marquise
Giving
is
us
making me
this.
work. Like, he was making it hard in practice, and I just loved seeing that for the both of them. I think it shows some really bright futures for them here, and it is just, that's a position where you cannot have too much depth.
Yes.
And
Fresh
how nice
legs.
to know that, you bring in those fresh legs and there's not a drop off in some of that production is really great news. All right, take us through the injury report, and what do we
Yes.
have going for this next week?
And granted, we are filming this Friday morning, so still haven't gotten the practice results from Friday and the final injury report. But I think positive note on Thursday is that Deven White and Luke Gedeke both upgraded to limited participation after not practicing on Wednesday. Mike Evans also was a full participant after upgrading from limited. And then safety Ryan Neal was the only one that was a non-participant. So kind of still some things to follow, but two key starters getting them back and seemingly
Heading
on
in the right
upswing
direction.
in the right direction for San Francisco is a huge positive.
Yes, this is a team.
Especially need the linebackers.
Yeah, say this
for
is a team
one.
you want to be full strength
Yes,
against.
yes.
So, all right, let's get into that now. Let's start looking at our one-on-one matchups that you are excited to see.
The one-on-ones, and we potentially they're going to have the same ones this week. But
I
that's fine.
picked about 1,000 because
okay.
there are so
Good-
many there
good
can
thinking,
be.
Good thinking.
Yeah.
So I did Rashad White against, and I just did it all, against Fred Warner,
Yeah.
Dre Greenlaw, and then Trent Williams against Joe Tryon-Shoyinka.
Yep.
So for Rashad White, I mean, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, one of the best tandems in the entire NFL. Complete, they can do it all, reading the eyes of the quarterback, just the sideline to sideline range, the change of direction skills, the coverage skills. They can do it all. And Rashad White has obviously made a significant impact in the passing game. And they basically just, I mean, teams almost don't even target the intermediate area or the middle of the field because of Fred Warner. Just his ability to take that away, take the targets, the tight ends, the running backs. So for the Bucs, kind of how are they able to continue to simulate whether it's the screens, kind of whether they do some wheel routes or something to get Rashad White involved. I think that's going to be a key battle this week. And then obviously Trent Williams.
Yep.
This is a guy, I will say he has been extremely fun to watch, and I think he gets his flowers in terms of position, but when you look at the NFL in its entirety as a whole, I think it's really interesting. I was watching one of his top 100 videos from 2023, and Tristan Wirfs gave him just incredible praise, but also when you listen to all of his peers in the NFL saying, this is the best player in the NFL. This is one of the best. I mean, over and over, almost every single one of those people. But just the consistency, his second level blocking, the athleticism, his ability against both speed and power rushes. You know, edge rushers have a hard time even finding ways to combat him because he's able to do so many different things. He can anchor in the pass game, can get off in the run game. I mean, just absolutely bulldozes linebackers at the second level. And he's a guy that the things he does, no one is able to mimic or replicate that. You know, if you talk to guys and it's like, oh, what tackle do you try to emulate? And they're like, Trent Williams. I mean, people are probably going to laugh in their face because you cannot. He's just a guy that, for his size, the things that he's able to do are just absolutely ridiculous and second to none. And I spoke with Tristan Wirfs just kind of wanting to get more of his idea of why he is the best. Because Tristan on the Top 100 video said, I will die on a hill. This is the best tackle in the game. And he said that seeing how fast he moves around, his second level blocking, that is what everyone tries to do. All tackles try to do what he does. I would put him as the number one player in the NFL because he's that big, he's that fast, and he's that athletic. Seeing the way that he plays the game is so fun to watch.
It's funny because I feel like that's how people talk about Tristan Wirfs, too.
Yes, right. But the fact that also in the conversation of the hierarchy, that Trent Williams is a guy that is in like Tristan Wirfs' way, essentially, and for him to be like, this guy is the best, I think just says a lot about not only Tristan Wirfs' character, but also just the level of play that Trent Williams is having at the age that he is. And then obviously for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and just the outside linebackers in general, going up against a guy like that, just being disciplined. I mean, obviously has the tantalizing traits, the speed, the bend, the height, the power, the quickness. So just kind of how they're able to try and minimize what Trent Williams is able to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously my top one was also Fred Warner versus just about anybody. But
Yeah.
I said versus Rashad. And then I also kind of said against Baker that, well, I mean, Fred Warner is a guy who he can be on one side of the field and suddenly
And
be
make it,
disrupting the
yes.
other side.
Yeah.
So for Baker, his eyes, his decision making, knowing kind of where Fred Warner is at all times and the decision making with that. But yeah, especially against Rashad, and especially because I feel like we just talked about how valuable the screen game and the dump offs to Rashad have been. And Fred Warner is so much like Levante David in the ability to sniff it out. Yep. And I saw a video of a play he made against the Rams that was wild. I mean, he was on the opposite hash.
Yeah.
And then just immediately the screen went to the other side. He's just this heat-seeking missile that goes through the whole defense and just like launched midair, speared the guy and took him down. It was honestly one of the most incredible things I've seen. And that screen looked so open and suddenly was just dead in the water immediately. And I was like, whoa, boy.
Yes.
So I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see, can we still have that be an effective part of our offense, knowing that it's kind of that strength on strength idea of like, that's what Fred Warner's so good at. That's what we've been so good at. But I also felt like another matchup was especially Robert Hainsey, but just our whole interior line versus Javon Hargrave.
Ooh, yes.
I mean, I was sort of surprised to learn he has as many sacks as Nick Bosa. I would not have guessed that. He already has 4.5 sacks. It's like when you think about Vita, of how not only are you such a potent person in there in the run, and to be a run stopper and all of that, but to have 4.5 sacks at his position is pretty incredible. When again you have Nick Bosa, and now they also are going to have Chase Young. That it is pretty tough when you have an interior guy who can also put so much pressure on a quarterback in that way. So I think that that's going to be really big. Is can your interior line, knowing how much your tackles have their hands full, can your interior line hold him as well? I think is really big. The other one-on-one matchup I picked for the other side of the ball, I picked Antoine for us against, especially against, I guess, Brock Purdy, but also just kind of their pass game in general. That I was thinking about how Brock Purdy threw the ball more than 20 yards 6 times last game and completed all of them for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. And on the season, he has the highest completion percentage of passes over 20 yards of any quarterback. They have the best passing offense in the league. So can you limit those big plays? That knowing how much he is looking, I mean, we think so much about like Christian McCaffrey and, some of their run game and their short game, their quick game, their all of that, which is also a threat for sure. But to see how much a guy who, again, Brock Purdy was just a year ago, Mr. Irrelevant, no one knew about, to where now he obviously has the green light to throw deep, and he has the confidence to throw deep. And it shows also it is working. When you are 6 of 6 for 3 touchdowns and over 160 yards on passes over 20 yards. So I just thought about how, again, when we talk about a strength on strength, I thought about Antoine Winfield back there, and can he get another one of those interceptions he's been seeking so much? Can he be helping over the top to limit some of those big passes, while also knowing how much he has to be aware of a Christian McCaffrey or, a George Kittle or somebody? Like, he's got a lot going on. And I just feel like he's going to be incredibly important this game in particular. So, all right, how about position groups you're excited to watch?
I'm going to go with the Buccaneers linebacker corps and the offensive tackles. So for the linebackers, huge game for Devin White, for Levante David, because the 49ers are really predicated on building the yards after catch and creating the mismatches with their personnel. They used a lot of 21 personnel. But just their roster and how they disguise things, how they test eyes with the discipline, with the jet motions, the orbits, all of these things that they do pre-snap, but then also just this kind of position-less hybrid players that they have. I mean, you have Christian McCaffrey, who's a running back that runs routes like an all-pro receiver. You have George Kittle that blocks like an offensive lineman with incredible pad level, and then also has the wiggle after the catch, like a running back. Then you have Brandon Ayuk, who has the route running ability, the cadence, the awareness, also his yards after catch ability. And then you have also Deebo Samuel, who's kind of that do-it-all hybrid that has, is able to fake at the stem and his route running, and also just the vision that he has as a runner, and kind of how they're able to exploit teams. And then also you have their second level blocking that kind of sets everything up with Trent Williams, with George Kittle, with Kyle Juszczyk, their fullback, who also they kind of use as a tight end in a lot of ways. They can line up in so many different places. So at the snap, the communication for the Bucs defense is going to be critical, but also gang tackling, their discipline in run fits, the angles of pursuit is going to be key to not let the 49ers kill you with the yards after catch. And this is a team that, you probably wouldn't be able to do a lot of the too high shell stuff, because if you give them that free release and they're able to exploit the underneath area for you, it is going to be a long day if you're not able to shut that down.
Yeah.
And then for offensive tackles, man, Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gedeke, power to you. Going up against Nick Bosa, Chase Young, just absolutely one of the most dynamic tandems in the NFL. And it's one of those things that I have to think for offensive coordinators, it kind of would give you nightmares creating protections in trying to go up against guys like that. And I laugh and liken it to, because it's like if you slide a protection or a chip or whatever to one side, it's almost like putting a Band-Aid on a gash. Mm-hmm. Like it's kind of the pick your poison, and it's still not going to really mitigate things, because you have Nick Bosa, who plays with incredible leverage, the power, the strength that he has, and then also Chase Young with his agility, the change of direction, the things that he's able to do. They are just so incredible at, and not necessarily just getting the sacks, but consistently getting that pressure and getting in the quarterback's face. So how are Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gedeke able to kind of stack up against that, but also give Baker Mayfield enough time to get the ball out quickly, and the timing is going to have to be incredible, because those guys kind of set the tone that allow the linebackers, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, to really roam around at the second level. So
Yep. I feel like I just want to say retweet to all that was essentially exactly what I had as well, that I talked about the inside linebackers, how important especially communication is going to be with that group, to the whole defense. Because again, like you talked about, there are so many offensive weapons they have that do so many different things. It is not like, it's one thing for us to talk about the idea of like, oh yeah, this running back has also been good in the screen game or whatever.
Right.
But like for them, they literally have two guys that you could classify as running backs or wide receivers.
Yes.
And that's different in terms of what you have to be aware of as a defense.
Yeah.
And the way you have to be able to communicate about what that's going to mean is very important. And so I look at that and I just think, man, inside linebackers, they're going to have to be so good at communication and so disciplined.
Yeah.
Are you actually, your run fits, your assignments, like your eyes, your all of it, don't get deceived by these different things playing fundamental. The gang tackling is going to be so important, because like you said, the yards after catch is wild about how much this team can get. And so it's like when you already know how many different ways they are going to try to beat you, if you are there and able to make a play, make the play, because that extra 8 yards, that extra 5 yards, that's going to be devastating if you let that happen multiple times. And I do feel like it is a great sign that we've had 10 and 9 tackles for loss the last 2 games. That's a huge, huge, huge deal. And it tells me they've been doing a good job of getting into the backfield to make those plays. And man, you're going to need some of those in this game. So yeah, I would say that inside linebackers one. I did just think about the outside linebacker group in terms of containing the running backs, containing those guys, and having to face Trent Williams. And especially thinking about, again, as we talked about, that they are so big into the big passing plays. You're going to need to get pressure on Purdy so that your DBs don't have to be sitting in coverage forever. That if they're having to cover for 3, 4, 5 seconds, like that's just going to be tough. And so can you make sure that they don't get the chance to get those routes fully developed or make those guys have to cover for too long? So the pressure is going to be so important for just making him get rid of it before they have a chance to let all of that develop. And then, yeah, I picked our offensive line. They have 36 pressures and 8 sacks over the last 2 games. That's a wild stat line.
Yes.
36 pressures in 2 games and 8 sacks. So when you look at Bosa, Chase Young, Javon Hargrave, and Eric Armstead, that is a potent front. Yeah. And so our offensive line, again, same thing of the communication, the chemistry, helping each other out, head on a swivel, all of that stuff, I think is going to be incredibly important. So I think we've probably kind of hit on it again, but keys to the game, for me, it was limiting the yak.
Yeah.
And then also it was the idea of don't beat yourself. I think that, again, this team has so many ways on both sides of the ball to attack you. The last thing you need to do is attack yourself.
Right.
Penalties and turnovers. To play a team like the 49ers, you have to play a complete and clean game.
Yes.
Because it's going to be, I think about how last year when we played them, the opening play, you get this big hit on Brock Purdy, and it's like
the momentum
of that, and then
there.
it's a penalty, and it's just like you just feel the deflation about that. And so just not letting that happen, especially early in the game, like play disciplined, play clean, keep the ball, don't turn it over. Right. Those things make them beat you, don't beat yourself. Right. So yeah, those would be my keys. What about you?
For me, it's especially defensively controlling the line of scrimmage and stopping the run, forcing them to be one-dimensional. And even Antoine Winfield Jr. was asked about, different things about Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel, and he laughed because he's like, most of the time it's, one guy that you're kind of keying in on, but he's like, this week we have 5 guys that we're trying to stop and contain. But I mean, the 49ers kind of have really, they dial up the zone schemes to kind of benefit Deebo Samuel, to benefit Christian McCaffrey, but also they've kind of been Kyle Shanahan's been the pioneer of the horizontal stretch with, the orbits, the jet motions, the screens, all of the movement that kind of stresses those C-gap assignments and spreads out, but then also they're able to go deep whenever teams kind of allocate resources to that with getting Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, all of these guys in space and how that's able to work against a defense. So how are the Bucs able to combat that with the run fits and trying to kind of limit what they're able to do and getting the push and the pressure on Purdy in the pocket?
Yep. All right. Well, so now let's get to our quote of the week. What do you have?
I'm going to go with a quote from run game coordinator and defensive line coach Casey Rogers on the 49ers offense.
Great.
And I just thought this was kind of really great, just perfectly sums it up. But he said, it's the way they use their people. They are all over the place. We just watched a couple of plays where Christian McCaffrey was at the X and Deebo Samuel was a tailback. That's a problem if you're in man coverage, because now you've got a run fit issue, a coverage issue, or you've got people playing positions that they do not usually play. Or if you stay regular, you've got a bad matchup somewhere. They create matchups, and the way they utilize their people is just really impressive. And just kind of goes back to, the position lists. They line up everywhere. Defenses are consistently caught off guard. So kind of how are they able to be disciplined, especially with the eyes, to not get sidetracked or faked by all of the movement that the 49ers use?
Yep, I think that's great. I chose one from Baker Mayfield. He was asked about what he's most pleased with personally from the first half of the season. He said, it's between the leadership and then the lack of turnovers. As long as you're taking care of the ball offensively, our defense is playing well enough to be able to be in it. We don't have to blow people out to win games. We don't have to score that many points. So as long as we take care of the ball and stay in manageable downs and distances, we should be good. At the same time, we also should be scoring more than 20 points each game. There are definitely a lot of points we've left on the board. It's knowing that we don't have to stress or press too much to score too many points, but we definitely have the capability to do it. We need to grow into that and learn that we should be able to score closer to 30 each game. I just really liked that, of especially him talking about the leadership and the lack of turnovers. Especially, I think that when Baker came in here, a lot of people were questioning, man, he's turned the ball over a lot in his career, and who's he going to be here after being at a lot of different franchises? And I loved that, first of all, he has displayed incredible leadership on this team. They voted him captain for a reason. They seem to love playing with and for him. The way he plays inspires people a lot, and he has been taking care of the ball while still extending plays, escaping. Like, he's not just playing safe, but he's still not turning the ball over at a bad rate. And I think that's really wonderful. And then I love that combination of where, man, for the offense to know, man, our defense, they're keeping us in games.
Yeah.
They're setting it up where we don't have to feel pressure to score a ton of points.
Right.
But we also know we are capable of scoring more. So we're not going to press. We're not going to freak out about it. But we also know, hey, like we've seen, we are capable of these games where we score 30 or more. So, yeah, I think that this week is a game where both need to happen. That the offense needs to score closer to 30.
Right.
Defense is going to have their hands, tied up. So, I think, so I felt like that was a really great one for him. All right. And then we'll close with, we always kind of end with a human interest fact and off the field something. So I actually wanted to promote a story that we just shot this week that's going to be coming out probably in about 2 weeks or so. I think this is really cool. So Delaney and Deven Thompkins both have children with Down syndrome, and they are very close in age to each other. One is about 3, one's about 4. They are also adorable.
Yes.
And we took them to somewhere in Tampa called Gigi's Playhouse that is a achievement center for people with Down syndrome. And we got a chance to hang out with them, watch them play with their kids. And I just sat down and did an interview with them talking about what it's like for them to each have a teammate that's going through the same thing, what it's been like to parent these kids, and especially be so young while you're facing this. And it just was really wonderful and really cool other side of them and some of the players. And so I just felt like that was just an incredible fact to learn. I mean, it is not super common to have a child with Down syndrome, and then especially at a really young age, and then to have both guys on your team that can relate to that. I just thought that was a really wonderful thing. So we shot that this week. It'll be coming out in a couple weeks. And I just thought that was a really wonderful fact, and that you guys gave some really thoughtful, great answers to a lot of the questions. So very excited about that. All right, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Tampa 2. We will see you next time.